Welcome to Crimepedia. I am your host this week. My name is Morgan. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And with me, as always, is my favorite true crime podcaster. She's my true crime BFF. She's my partner in crime. It's the lovely Cherry. Hello, Cherry.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a good week. Hope you've not been binging House of Dragon too much.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Well, luckily, you can't binge it too much since there's only been 2 episodes so far, but
Yeah.
still really good.
Yes. Episode 3 needs to hurry on up now.
You know, it's sad though, because I feel like these Game of Thrones shows or House of the Dragon, they're so good, but you know it's only going to be like 8 episodes or whatever it is. It's like, I need more.
Hopefully not. Hopefully it's a few seasons.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about per each season. It's like only
I see.
8 episodes or whatever, 10 episodes. It's like I need like 20 episodes of this a season.
But I do that with podcasts too. I catch up with podcasts and I'm like, I've got nothing else to listen to now because I'm caught up with everything. I go through everyone's back catalogues and then that's it. I'm caught up and we did have a message. I forget his name now, so I apologize. We had a message from a guy who is a truck driver by trade that listens to our show in his truck while he's driving. So hello to you. Thank you for your email. I've not got my email with me, so I can't remember what the name of the person was. But that must be, if you drive a lot and you listen to podcasts, you must catch up really quick, really fast. Especially if you're a truck driver, because you can only listen to the radio for so long, and like CDs and stuff or MP3s or whatever you listen, you can only listen so long. So luckily, this week's episode, we've got a 2-parter for you. So it's 13 pages that he's written up for this week's episode. So we're going to keep you entertained for a couple of hours at least. So sit yourself back, get ready. And this week is Morgan's case.
It is my case. So just a quick little background. So people know that I love MAP, right? I love MAP. No denying that.
No.
The other thing that I really, really love besides MAP is I am addicted. I love the Olympics. And I've loved the Olympics since I was very, very, very little.
Okay.
This might age me, but I can remember I was actually sick at the time. I think probably had like a stomach bug or something. I was like 4 years old or something. Yeah, I was 4 years old, and I remember lying on the couch watching the 1984 Summer Olympics that happened in LA. Okay. I remember watching like Mary Lou Retton doing her gymnastic stuff. So I mean, so from a very early age, I loved it. And so this week's case, or actually I should say the cases that we're going to be covering
for
for the next 2 weeks is something that I learned about when I was 12 years old. It was 1992. It was during the Summer Olympics in Barcelona, Spain. NBC had the coverage, and they did a special on it. It was the 20th anniversary of the Munich Massacre, in which 11 Israeli athletes were taken hostage and killed. And so it was the first time I learned about this. And I remember watching this little, it's not even documentary. It was probably, maybe 10 minutes long, whatever. So there's the story of it. And I remember being like absolutely just horrified and like scared. I remember being physically scared after learning about it and watching this. And I remember, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I remember being afraid that that the main guy, his nom de guerre, his name that he took up and used during the whole process, his name was Isa. I remember seeing him, and I remember thinking that he was going to come and find me because I had watched this episode or this story.
Yeah. Oh.
But ever since I saw that when I was like 12 years old, I've just been absolutely fascinated with it. And but I've never been satisfied with like what I've learned about it or what what people have put out about it. Mm-hmm. So this week we're going to be talking about the 1972 Munich Massacre, and this is probably the most in-depth telling of the story that a lot of people really are going to hear. So with that, let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
50 years ago, the games of the 20th Olympiad were marred when 8 Palestinian commandos scaled the security fence surrounding the Olympic Village, and attacked the Israeli team compound. For nearly 20 hours, the world watched and waited as the lives of 11 Israelis weighed in the balance. This is the story of how poor planning, a lack of foresight, and ineffective leadership led to tragedy. This is Currentpedia, and this is the Munich Olympic Massacre.
This is an ITN news flash from the Olympic Village in Munich, where early this morning armed Palestinian guerrillas raided the sleeping quarters of the Israeli team.
Hier ist ITN mit einer Sondersendung aus dem Olympischen Dorf in München. Heute Morgen haben bewaffnete Palästinenser mehrere Geiseln.
Good afternoon. I'm Jim McKay speaking to you live at this moment from ABC headquarters just outside the Olympic Village in Munich, West Germany. The peace of what have been called the Serene Olympics was shattered just before dawn this morning, about 5 o'clock, when Arab terrorists armed with submachine guns, faces black.
Jim, I am almost directly over the Israeli building. It will be a famous number before long. It's building 31. It's on Connolly's.
4 and 5 o'clock this morning, a group of Arab Palestinians terrorists rushed inside the building, killed the coach of our wrestlers, Moshe Weinberg, and took his hostages.
Obvious that something quite serious was going on out there. Entire areas ringed off by troops, heavily armed with dogs, keeping everybody away. We tried to approach, was stopped by one of the guards with a machine gun.
I just got my final word. When I was a kid, my father used to say, our greatest hopes and our worst fears are seldom realized. Our worst fears have been realized tonight.
All right, Sherry, on August 26, 1972, the games of the 20th Olympiad were opened by IOC President Avery Brundage in Munich, West Germany. The host city was brimming with pride and good spirits, as visitors from around the world had arrived in the beautiful Bavarian metropolis in droves. This was the first major international event held in Germany since the end of World War II, and the organizers were determined to share with the world the new Germany. With the motto, Die Heerenspiel, the cheerful games, the hope of the organizers was that these games would proceed in a serene, unconstrained, and peaceful fashion. It was expected to be in stark contrast to the image of the previous Summer Olympics held in Germany, that being the 1936 Games in Berlin, which had taken place under the Nazi regime. To meet this expectation, organizers determined that the presence of a heavily armed police force would not have been appropriate for the creation of the peaceful atmosphere that they were aiming for. Rather than an armed security force in military uniforms, organizers had created a volunteer civil security service who wore friendly, light blue leisure suits. This security service, which were dubbed the Ollies, was made up mostly of officers who were sportsmen or interested in sports, and who had been recruited from the ranks of the police and border patrol. By the time of the games, the Olympic Committee had hired 2,130 men and women to make up the security service. Now, this was down from the nearly 90,000 police officers that had been employed for the 1964 Summer Olympics in Tokyo.
Whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Oh, that is a ton.
Yeah, it
honestly,
is.
To be truthful, 90,000 is a little overkill, I think.
Yeah, just a tad.
Yeah, I mean, but looking at around this time, the other Olympics that had been occurring, 2,100 is really low compared to them, but 90,000 is like extremely high. You're probably looking anywhere around 20,000. Probably around 20,000 security officials that have been hired for Mexico City. And I believe Montreal was about around 20,000 as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Now, when it came to the Olympic Village, the security service was expected to do the following: protect the village from trespassing by unauthorized persons and exercise a general access control function. They were to settle minor disruptions of order in the village.
Yeah.
Intervene in cases of criminal activity, and hand over such cases to the criminal police watch station in the Olympic Village for further action. control traffic, and exercise a certain preventive influence by constant patrolling.
Okay.
Very, very basic functions.
Yeah,
okay?
just basically there to keep things in order, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, the security service was divided into small groups of men and women who served 4 tours of duty. Now, only the night shift was armed with small pistols. Other than that, completely unarmed. The only thing that they were given were walkie-talkies. So they were armed with walkie-talkies.
But then, like here, our officers aren't usually armed. You know, the most that they're armed with is a taser. So for me, that's not that unusual, really. I don't find that very unusual.
Yeah.
But I guess for you guys over there to have
It would
unarmed
be.
police officers,
Yeah.
it's really, really unusual. But for me, that's not really that unusual.
I would say that, most times at sporting events, I would say that most of the security service would be unarmed, but you would have some sort of armed presence. I mean, they wouldn't be front and center, I would say, for the most part.
Right.
But I would say that at least there would be some in case of emergencies when you need them.
Okay.
Now, with the Olympics, we talk about the security force that they created.
Mm-hmm.
Both the Munich police and the Bundeswehr, the German army, didn't have a lot of influence or they didn't have really a lot of roles when it came to functions within the Olympics in the Olympic Park and the Olympic Village.
Okay.
They were around, but they basically were there for traffic control. So you would have your traffic cops, getting people in and out.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, as for securing the Olympic Village, the organization committee continued to practice its minimalist approach. Okay.
Yeah.
In order to prevent the village from appearing like a fortress, the organizers used a 2-meter-high wire fence without barbed wire on top as an outer barrier. Now, for those of you in the United States, that's just over around 6.5 feet tall.
Yeah,
okay?
Not too tall.
Now, I sent some pictures to you, Cherry, so you can actually see what this fence looked like.
Okay.
This fence is probably the puniest little fence I could imagine someone putting up for security.
Yeah. It's not really like a chicken wire fence kind of thing, really. It's
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. It's not if what you would imagine being like a temporary fence.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know, because we have fences like that here. That's what our fencing is like. I mean, unless you've got somewhere that you're going into that's absolutely like somewhere that is I don't know, like a pharmaceutical company area or somewhere that you shouldn't be, the fencing like that, like to go into industrial areas, the fencing will be like that. It's just that's just like kind of how we do it, I guess.
It's your simple temporary fence.
Simple, yeah.
There's really nothing that can prevent someone from getting over that fence at all.
No. I would think if you're a guy, you probably get over that quite easy.
Now, to be fair, prior to this point, there had never been a completely enclosed Olympic Village at any of the previous events.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did, the security that they did surrounding the Olympic Village is probably in line with what other Olympic committees had done prior.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't want to sit here and say, oh, well, they didn't do all they could have to prevent what happened from happening, because they were just doing, this was the norm. No one expected the village to be, have
absolutely not. No.
Jump a fence. Okay.
No, absolutely not.
Now, there were 10 entry gates, which were manned by the guards between 6 a.m. and midnight that encircled the Olympic Village. Now, between midnight and 6 a.m., only 4 main gates would remain open. The remaining closed gates were to be stationed by a single guard throughout the night. All other security service employees on the night shift would be assigned to patrol both the interior and exterior of the village, usually in doubles. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The Olympic Committee's chief of security was Dr. Manfred Schreiber, who also was the chief of police in Munich. Now, prior to the games, Dr. Schreiber had enlisted a police psychologist named George Sieber to complete a risk analysis. Now, Sieber was an expert in global terrorist activities, and he devised a list of 26 worst-case scenarios, most of them involving foreign-based terror networks. Now, a lot of the scenarios that he did put forward were kind of I don't want to say out there, but they were like the worst case scenario. Like one of them was in regards to a Scandinavian airliner being hijacked and crashed into the Olympic Stadium.
Oh.
I think he talked about the IRA, bombing Olympic sites, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Now, threat scenario 21 involved the possibility of 12 armed Palestinian commandos scaling the perimeter fence of the Olympic Village, invading the Israeli team compound, taking a number of hostages, and threatening to kill those hostages unless Arab political prisoners were freed from Israeli jails, and the Palestinian commandos flown to safety in some friendly Arab capital. Even if the Palestinians failed in their primary mission, Sieber warned that they would undoubtedly make a bloody mess of the games, and on no account would they surrender alive.
Oh, no.
Now, Manfred Schreiber was not happy with the work completed by Sieber and concluded that his scenarios were too far-fetched and unrealistic. Schreiber had believed that the most realistic threats would have come from the troubled national and local scenes. Now, this scenario 21, maybe it was unrealistic and too far-fetched because it wasn't 12 armed Palestinians that did that. It was 8.
Oh, okay.
The only thing that he got wrong was the number of Palestinians.
People.
How crazy is that?
So how did he have inside knowledge, do you think, then? He must have had
I don't think he did.
Well, he's just working this out for himself.
He's just working it out because here's the thing. He understood what the Palestinians at the time, the Palestinian commandos, the Fedayeen, as we'll talk about them.
We'll get to that, yeah.
The commandos, what they were and how they planned missions and how they went about doing it, right?
Yeah, okay.
Palestinian terrorism actually was a recent development, especially the group that did this, Black September. They had only been around for a year. But they've already made that name for themselves. So he was fairly confident in what he would expect to see them do and how they would do it.
Okay.
Which is amazing. I mean, it's amazing now looking at what he came up with. And at the time when Schreiber read it, he's like, no way that's going to happen. But he was right on. Okay. Now, the games began with roughly 10,000 athletes and officials from 121 nations. That included 15 athletes and 15 officials and coaches from Israel. It would be the 6th Olympic Games that Israel had attended since gaining independence in 1948. Now, the presence of the Israeli delegation, competing less than 30 years after the Holocaust and just 6 miles from the Dachau concentration camp, was a statement on Israel's willingness to accept a different Germany. So this was a big event for them.
Yeah.
Even before the games, the Israeli delegation actually did go to a memorial service at Dachau and laid wreaths and spent time there. So this is a huge deal for them, and it's really a huge deal for Germany as well.
Well, yeah, definitely.
Now, most of the Israeli delegation were housed at the Olympic Village in Munich. There were 3 that were housed in Kiel, where the sailing events were being held. 21 men of the Israeli delegation occupied apartments 1 through 6 at Conleystrasse 31. Units 7 through 10 of the building were occupied by teams from Hong Kong and Uruguay. A German caretaker and his family lived in apartment 11. Now, all female athletes were housed in bungalows located in a separate section of the Olympic Village. No special precautions were planned for the Israeli compound at Conleystrasse 31. In a claim that would later be disputed by Israeli officials, the Olympic Committee would state that just 2 weeks prior to the games, an Israeli security official had inspected the village and determined that the safety measures put in place were adequate and that they had not requested any additional precautions for the Israeli delegation. Okay. Now the Israelis they disputed this, saying, no, we asked for more. We were concerned about the location. We were concerned about the lack of security in the village, and that they actually had requested additional security for their building. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Now, the Israeli compound was located approximately 80 meters. This is about 262 feet away from gate 25A. Now, this is a secondary gate with minimum security. Now, because it lacked a permanent security guard at night and was the nearest gate to team lodging on Conleystrasse, many athletes would choose this part of the fence to climb when arriving back to the village after hours.
Oh, okay. So that's how they get back in. Yeah.
Because at night after hours, like I said, there's only 4 gates that actually remained open. And to be honest, very inconvenient for most of the athletes. So they would just find the closest gate to where they were staying and just jump the fence.
God.
Now, once the games began, the lax nature of security in and around the Olympic Village became very apparent. Despite appropriate credentials being needed to enter the athletes' village, many spectators were able to gain access without issue. Then, after a quiet first week of the games, the Olympic Committee decided to further relax the rules on entry into the village. This was partly in part because of journalists, or those who claimed to be journalists, were complaining about, they would say, the Gestapo tactics of the security force.
Yeah.
And so they decided Olympic Committee decided, okay, well, let's just not hassle people when they try to get in.
Oh dear.
So that by this point, basically any journalist or those who claim to be journalists could gain entry into the village without question. Now, there was one French journalist who was shocked when he and his colleagues were able to get in without even showing their press credentials. He also said that he would encounter a Belgian visitor driving around the village in his own car, even though personal vehicles had been banned from the village.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can go and you can actually see like videos from the time and from the Olympics in the Olympic Village, and you will see like athletes walking around in the tracksuits, and just surrounding them is just spectators. Like there's nothing stopping it.
Joe Public.
Everyone.
Yeah.
Like it was basically, hey, you want to come into the village? Come on in.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually really scary because, well, we'll learn, especially when it comes to Israeli compound, there, like a lot of these like outer doors were not locked. There were no locks on them, so anyone could walk into any building at any time and just wander around.
Oh, that's crazy.
Now, because of the proximity to the gate, as well as the obvious lack of security, many members of the Israeli delegation became very troubled with the security situation.
Definitely.
Now, also for many of the Israeli athletes, the proximity of the Sudanese team dorms, as well as numerous Palestinian workers in the village, gave them a general sense of discomfort, which sounds crazy, but at this time, there was... I mean, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict had been going on. There had been numerous terrorist attacks towards Israelis and Israeli citizens in the past. Well, actually, the past few years. So yeah, I mean, I understand this discomfort that they have.
Yeah, I can understand it, but I just wouldn't have thought that it would happen like there at the Olympics. You kind of just don't expect it. So I can see why they were so lax with the security at the same time, because I can understand why they were so apprehensive, because obviously they got a lot going on where they're from. But then I can see why they're not, because it's the Olympics. You just don't expect this kind of thing to happen at the Olympics.
No, not at all.
So I can see why they were a bit lax with it. Probably not ever since this. They've not been laps, but it's a shame this had to happen.
But they've always talked about the Olympic, I'm doing quotation marks, the Olympic truce, right? So like all nations are supposed to like put aside their political differences, and they aren't supposed to fight in wars during the Olympics, which is a nice thought, but it's not.
Because they're athletes. They're not, there's no politics in this, is it?
Exactly.
It's just the athletics. So you wouldn't expect it to be carried over into the Olympics.
But as we know now,
Eurovision,
look,
maybe, but Olympics, no.
Exactly. But you look now, and a lot of times the politics gets brought into Olympics all the time, right?
Yeah, it's in everything, isn't it?
The Olympics have become at times so political. So this idea that we're putting political differences aside, it's complete bullshit.
I think
normal
people
yeah.
put their differences aside.
I think athletes themselves put it aside, but when you come to like judging
that's not what they're there
officials
for.
and stuff,
yeah, of course,
exactly. Now, some of the Israeli athletes did have a fear that they would be attacked during the events.
Aww.
But despite these fears and concerns, there were no calls to bolster security because they had assumed that security forces must have been working undercover.
Well, yeah, you would assume that, wouldn't you? Maybe they're not there in presence, dressed up as security, but you would think there would be undercover security there that you wouldn't know about.
Exactly. Now, on the evening of September 4th, the Bavarian branch of the Federal Office for Constitutional Protection received a tip from an operative in Lebanon that 5 Fedayeen terrorists were apparently planning some kind of operation in West Germany. According to the report, there were 5 Palestinians still in Beirut awaiting orders to fly to Cairo, where they would receive fake Yemeni passports. Then from Cairo, they would proceed to Athens to meet a Dane calling himself Jem, who would fill them in on the operation. Now, with no conclusive proof of a planned attack, authorities could only keep their eyes out for potential threats. Now, what authorities did not know was that the Palestinians who would actually attack the games were already safely in Munich, making final preparations for their operation.
What is wrong with people? Like, it's ridiculous, isn't it? It's just so stupid.
And honestly, to be fair, this isn't the first report that came about potential attack.
Yeah.
Even prior to the Olympics, there had been reports of Palestinians planning attack on the Olympics.
Yeah.
But here's a problem. I mean, you get these reports, but I understand, unless you have like some concrete facts or like, okay, this is exactly what's happening, this is who's involved, there's not much you can really do.
No.
But wouldn't you think that with these tips and reports they're getting, that they would say, okay, well, you know what, maybe there's something here. Maybe we need to, put some more security around the village, more security around the Israelis, more security around their complex.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the safe. Even if the reports are incorrect, wouldn't you want to be more safe?
Yeah, of course.
And then sorry?
Yeah.
But they did nothing. They did nothing with any of these reports. They just kind of said, okay, well, we'll keep an eye out. Okay.
We just watch out for them.
Yep. Now, on the same evening, so this is September 4th, 8 Palestinian Fedayeen met at Munich's central train station in order to discuss the details of their operation. 6 men who served as foot soldiers had arrived in Munich 5 days earlier. 3 had flown in from Tripoli to Rome and then on to Munich. The other 3 had come by train from Belgrade. They all carried forged Jordanian passports with crudely faked West German entry visas. Their names were Afif Ahmed Hamid, Khalid Jawad, Ahmed Sheikh Thai, Mohammed Safadi, Adnan Al-Ghashi, and Jamal Al-Ghashi, who is Adnan's nephew.
I hope you're not expecting me to be able to recite those names, because there's no way that we're going to get that out straight away.
No. It took me a while to
I bet it did,
to figure it out, and I'm sure I butchered some of this. Yeah. Now, they were all in their late teens and early 20s and had spent their childhood in Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon. Now, they would be joined by 2 older Palestinians who had been in and out of Munich since midsummer, using their visits to observe the Olympic facilities, especially the village. They would serve as the operation commanders. 27-year-old Latif Afif would serve as the technical commander. Now, his father was a wealthy Christian businessman, and his mother was Jewish. Okay?
I always think about the parents of, people that do school shootings, people that do terrorist attacks and stuff like that, because you must, as a parent, you must think about it and just think, God, that's my child. And obviously you love that child, but you must be thinking, what the hell went wrong? What the hell
Yeah.
caused my child to do something so brutal and so awful from that little kid that's grown up, in your house, and that you've brought this child up as best you can? What went wrong? What went
Yeah.
wrong for them to actually think that this is a good thing to do, that this is a beneficial thing for whatever religion they believe or whatever? How has this happened? It must be absolutely awful for the parents.
I think him being the operations commander says a lot.
Yeah.
Because with his father being Christian, mother being Jewish, it kind of reminds us that this necessarily wasn't a Muslim versus
Yeah.
Jewish
Yeah, of
dispute. This
course.
was literally an Arab, Palestinian,
That's right.
Israeli conflict that was going on.
Horrible. Yeah.
You can look at their childhood, and I don't want to say understand how they got to this point,
Yeah.
but they looked at their lives and felt like they had no other choice. They had nothing else to live for. They were forced to live
Awful,
in.
isn't it?
They were forced to live in basically, they were refugee camps with minimal service. They were not treated in a humane way, and so the hatred towards what they view as their persecutors, the Israelis, it makes sense, right? But this is the problem: is there's ways to go about it to kind of make your voice heard, and what they did is not the way.
No. Oh no, obviously not.
Not the way at all. Now, Afif who was born in Nazareth. He chose the nom de guerre Isa, which is Arabic for Jesus. Okay. Now, Isa had studied engineering in West Germany for several years and spoke fluent German. As a cover for his activities, he was able to get himself hired on as a civil engineer for the Olympics.
Oh, no.
Okay. The operation's second command was Yusuf Nazl, who went by the name Tony. He too studied in West Germany and knew the language. Tony too had taken a job with the Olympics as a cook in the Olympic Village.
Oh, no.
Neither Isa nor Tony had been required to undergo any significant security checks in order to obtain their positions. They all belonged to an organization called Black September. No checks. No checks at all.
Crazy.
But once again, to be fair, even if they did checks, I don't think they'd find anything on them.
No, of course not. No,
because they were both college educated. They had both lived in West Germany. They both spoke the language.
Of course.
There would be nothing that would be a red flag for them.
No. That's crazy, isn't it?
It is. So they all belong to an organization called Black September, who had taken their name from a 1970 massacre of Palestinian refugees in Jordan by the army of King Hussein.
I thought it was going to be like a band or something. Bananarama. That Black September sounds like a quite cool band name. I thought it was like going to be a rock band. Wasn't expecting it to be that.
No,
yeah.
It's about it's in regards to it was happened in September 1970. It was a massacre of Jordanian refugees. Now, the operation had been created in mid-July 1972 by three senior Black September figures named Abu Layad, and Fakir Umari. After the International Olympic Committee had rejected a bid from the Palestinian Liberation's Youth Federation to enter a Palestinian team in the 1972 games. So they were actually in Rome, and they saw the newspaper article about the Palestinians being refused entry into the Olympics, and so that's when they were like, okay, well, let's hatch out a plan to disrupt the Olympics. Now the rejection of the Palestinians did make sense, because for entry into Olympics you need to have national backing, and so at the time there was no national state, Palestinian state. So the Olympics obviously said, well, you're not a country, you're not a nation, so you can't participate.
Okay.
It was what it was.
Yeah.
Now, after meeting with their foot soldiers, Isa and Tony would collect 8 Kalashnikov assault rifles, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and 10 hand grenades, which had been stored in a locker at the train station. The weapons had arrived in West Germany, concealed in the luggage of a well-dressed Arab couple flying into Cologne from Libya on August 23rd. A customs inspector at the airport went through the first of the couple's 2 suitcases, which turned out to contain piles of women's underwear.
Ugh.
After being berated by the couple for pawning through her panties, the inspector would wave through the second bag, the one which was filled with the weapons.
And? Don't tell me you just let it go.
Yeah, you let it go. Waved it through.
A bag full of
weapons. Yeah.
And he just let it through.
Because
was he on their payroll? They paid him off.
No. Because they did it so the women's underwear was so that he's looking through it and they start berating him like, how dare you look through all this underwear? And so he's probably embarrassed at that point. And so they're like, okay, just come on, you're fine.
Oh no, that's so bad.
If he would have said, oh, I'm sorry, I gotta check this other one, this whole operation would have been done.
Yeah.
Now, at 3:30 a.m., the Palestinian Fedayeen packed their weapons into their sports bags and put on athletic warm-up suits bearing the names of Arab countries. Now, about a half an hour later, the 8 men arrived at the outer perimeter fence encircling the village. They would divide into 2 groups of 4. Issa had pre-selected gate 25A as a location for his group to scale. He knew that this gate was unguarded after curfew, and athletes would often climb the fence at this location to return to their compounds after hours. As Issa and his group approached the gate, they encountered some drunk Canadian water polo players who themselves were attempting to climb the same fence. Issa would propose that the 2 groups help each other over the barrier, to which the Canadians were more than happy to agree.
Of course they were.
Yeah. Now, you'll see, if you look this up, a lot of times people will say that they were Americans. This was actually incorrect. So that
no, it's the Canadians. It wasn't us. It was okay.
Yeah. So it was because I think the Palestinians believed they were Americans. I mean, come on, Americans and Canadians are pretty much the same or very similar.
You sound very similar, to be fair. Like if you're not from America or Canada, Americans and Canadians sound very similar. So I can see how they did feel that.
No, yeah. So, but actually, there's 2 things. It didn't make sense for Americans to be at that fence because they actually were not. The American compounds were not on Conleystrasse. They were actually on another street.
Right.
But a few years ago, the people, the Canadians that were involved or had helped them over actually came forward and said, yeah, it was us. So they actually were. They had been out celebrating or watching. At the time, there was a series of hockey games going on between the Soviet hockey team and I think either I don't remember if it was NHL teams or if it was the Canadian national team, but they had been playing a series of games, and I think the Soviets had lost, so they were out late celebrating, watching that. Now, the second commando group, which was being led by Tony, would chose the next gate down for their entry point, which too was unguarded. And to make matters easier, right next to the fence actually stood a stool that had been left by one of the guards. So they just simply used the stool
to stand over.
To stand over and hop over the fence, yeah.
God.
Now, once inside, the 2 groups would set out separately for the Israeli compound. As one of the groups hurried across the grounds, they were spotted by some postal workers who reported the sighting to security. Assuming that the men were athletes, security took no action.
Of course they didn't.
Now, before reaching Conleystrasse 31, the commandos would briefly pause to don ski masks and to take their weapons from their sports bags. Issa would exchange his tracksuit for a linen safari outfit, which he topped off with an oversized white hat. He'd obscure his facial features with black shoe polish and large sunglasses. Upon reaching their destination, the 8 men would enter an unlocked outer door at street level at 31 Conleystrasse and enter a foyer in which a number of apartments could be accessed. The men immediately went to apartment 1, a 2-story apartment which housed 7 Israeli coaches and referees. From his earlier canvassing of the compound, Issa had known that apartment 1 had convenient exits and had access to the upper floors and basement parking garage. This would serve as an ideal command post and gathering point for hostages. The door to apartment 1 was locked, but Issa carried a crudely made copy of the key. After numerous attempts and with considerable noise, they were able to turn the lock. Now, the commotion at the door had awakened 40-year-old wrestling referee Yusuf Gutfreund, who got up to listen to the sound coming from the door. As the door began to open, he got a glimpse of the masked man with guns and threw his 6'3", 290-pound frame against the door and yelled to his roommates, "Take cover, boys." Gutfreund was able to hold the intruders off long enough for weightlifting coach Tuvia Skolski to smash a window and escape. After a few seconds, the intruders were able to use the butt of a rifle as a crowbar and managed to push their way into the apartment. Seeing Skolski jumping through the window, they fired a few shots at him but failed to stop him. Now, alerted by the shouts of Gutfreund and the sounds of gunfire, the other Israelis in the apartment woke up to find themselves facing 8 masked gunmen. Before they could flee or defend themselves, they were herded into the unit's living room. In addition to Gutfreund, the hostages included 40-year-old track coach and father of 4 named Edmitzur Shapira, 53-year-old shooting coach Gihat Shor, 27-year-old Andrei Spitzer, a newly married fencing coach with a 1-month-old daughter, 50-year-old Polish-born weightlift referee Yakov Springer, and 33-year-old wrestling coach Moshe Weinberg, a father of a newborn son.
Oh.
So interesting to know, have you ever seen the movie Munich, the Steven Spielberg movie? Okay. If you ever watch it, or those that are listening, if you watched it or if you do watch it, at the very beginning of Munich, they basically do a really thorough reenactment of the events. And the actor that plays Moshe Weinberg is actually his newborn son. It was played by Guri Weinberg, played his father in Munich. So if you watch it and you, the character plays Moshe Weinberg is Guri Weinberg, who at the time was a newborn.
Yeah. Oh, that's awful.
Now, as the Palestinians began to bind their captives with lengths of pre-cut rope, Moshe Weinberg lunged at Issa with a fruit knife, slicing through his left breast pocket and knocking him down. But before Weinberg was able to grab Issa's rifle, another Fedayeen shot him through the cheek, wounding him severely. Leaving the other hostages bounding under guard, Tony forced Weinberg out onto Conleystrasse and lead him and 4 other terrorists on a search for more hostages. Now they bypassed apartment 2, which housed the fencers, shooters, and a track athlete. Weinberg would lead them to him and the 4 terrorists to apartment 3, which housed Israelis, weightlifters, and wrestlers. Now, it's believed that Weinberg had done this, believing that the weightlifter and the wrestlers would be able to put up a fight. But unfortunately, the occupants of apartment 3 had slept through all the commotion and were caught by surprise when Tony and his men burst through their front door.
Oh, wow.
From apartment 3, the Fedayeen were able to add 6 more Israeli hostages. They were 24-year-old Latvian-born wrestler Eliezer Halfin, wrestler Mark Slavin, who was born in Belarus, and he was the youngest member of the Israeli team at 18 years old. Yosef Romano, a 32-year-old Libyan-born weightlifter and the father of 2 young girls. 28-year-old weightlifter Zeev Friedman. Gad Zabari, a 33-year-old flyweight wrestler. And David Berger, a weightlifter originally from Cleveland, Ohio. He had immigrated to Israel in 1970 in order to pursue his dream of competing in the Olympics. Now, after securing the new hostages, the terrorists marched the 6 Israeli athletes back towards apartment 1. In the foyer outside apartment 1, Gad Zabari suddenly slapped aside the rifle held by the guard closest to him and sprinted down the stairway leading to the underground parking garage. A chasing Palestinian attempted to gun Zabari down, but Zabari was able to elude gunfire by dodging between concrete pillars. Now, the distraction caused by Zabari prompted Moshe Weinberg to attempt a second assault on his captors. He would tackle Mohammed Safadi and land a punch to his face, which knocked out several of his teeth and fractured his jaw. But as Weinberg reached for the gun that the terrorists had dropped, Another Fedayeen opened fire, hitting Weinberg several times in the chest, killing him instantly. Leaving Weinberg's body in the foyer, the Fedayeen shoved the other 5 hostages into apartment 1. While the terrorists were securing their hostages, a village cleaning lady, alerted by the gunfire, put an alarm to the Olympic security office. Officials there sent Ali, armed solely with a walkie-talkie, to check out the situation at Königstrasse 31. He arrived at 4:50 a.m. to find a masked gunman guarding the door. After asking what was going on and receiving no response, Ali radioed headquarters with a description of the scene and promptly left. Shortly after, Yusuf Romano decided to take matters into his own hands. Romano would grab for one of the terrorist guns, knocking the Fedayeen down, but before he was able to secure the rifle, another terrorist would shoot Romano dead. Isa would order Romano's body be left as it was, slowly leaking blood in the middle of the room, as a warning to the remaining 9 hostages.
Oh, dear.
A security officer based at the Olympic Administration building near the village would call Manfred Schreiber at home and notify him about the scene at Königstrasse 31. Schreiber would immediately order all available guards at the Olympic complex to cordon off the Israeli compound and to lock down the village. Into an attempt to prevent knowledge from what was occurring to get to the outside world before the situation could be contained, Schreiber would order an absolute blackout of information from the scene. No reporters. Hold on a second. Whoops. No reporters or TV crews would be allowed access to the village, nor would the Olympic Press Center have anything to say on the matter for the time being. At 9:51, that's not the time. At 5:10 a.m., a Munich police officer was sent to Königstrasse 31 by Manfred Schreiber to find out what was going on. As he reached the building, Isa would appear on the second floor balcony and said in German that the athletes of the Israeli team would be held as hostage. Only upon fulfillment of certain conditions put down in writing would they be released. Isa would then throw down 2 pieces of paper down to street level. Let me say that one more time. Isa would then throw 2 pieces of paper down to street level. The officer would pick up the papers and hurry back to Schreiber. The papers containing a typewritten message along with a long list of names clarified who the intruders were and what they wanted. The men who seized Königstrasse 31 demanded the release of 236 political prisoners whose names were listed on one of the papers. Most of the list were Palestinians who were being held in Israeli jails, but they also demanded the release of Andreas Bader and Ulrike Meinhof, the leaders of the West German left-wing militant organization Red Army faction, who are currently being held in maximum security prison near Stuttgart. The letter would further warn that any attempt by the Germans to interfere with the operation would lead to the liquidation of all the Israeli hostages, with the Federal Republic of Germany being held responsible.
Wow.
And with that, we are done with part 1.
That is just crazy.
It is extremely, extremely crazy. Scary. Very scary what they did. What they did and what they were able to do.
How they got away with it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How they got away with it is it's very scary how easily they got away with it, to be honest.
There's interesting things with what they did. So, like I said earlier, there were 21 Israeli athletes and officials right there in that building, that complex. So apartments 1 through 6. And for them to only want to say only capture roughly half of them.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think part of it has to do with the amount of gunfire that occurred. I think they were worried that, by that point, officials or police would be notified and on their way. So they didn't have
would be on their way. That's right.
They had the time. I do think it's interesting that they bypassed apartment 2. And I think, people assume, okay, it's because Moshe Weinberg said, "Oh, there's no Israelis here. We got to go to apartment 3. This is where they're located." My only problem with this is actually outside of each complex, there is basically a list of who's in what apartment. So
Oh God.
so in pictures,
So they
you
knew.
can actually see in some of the pictures. There's almost looks like a bulletin board type thing, and on it is like
That tells you where everyone is.
exactly.
Yeah. That's great for terrorists.
Yeah. The other thing,
Or security in general, that's bad,
yeah, I don't talk about it in this case or this episode or the next episode, but actually also in that 31 Königstrasse, in that same like location that the apartment 1 is. So the way that the building's set up is apartment 1 is actually 2-story. So the first floor and second floor are apartment 1. And you get from the first floor to second floor inside apartment 1.
Inside,
But there's
yeah.
also a elevator and stairs that lead you all the way to floor 3. Floor 3 was actually athletes. There were 4 athletes from Hong Kong in that same building, in that same hallway, where the terrorists were. And
Wow.
there's actually stories about how they got out, which I found absolutely fascinating. One was one of the athletes from Hong Kong was had competed in judo, and his competition had completed. He actually had a flight that day from Munich to London that he had to catch, and so at 11 a.m. he actually decided, I'm just leaving. So he leaves his apartment, walks down the stairs. He runs into one of the terrorists. They just ask him, Hong Kong. He said yes. They showed him the door, and he left. He walked out.
Oh wow.
Another of the Hong Kong athletes actually had to climb onto the roof and escape by like walking down, like kind of going down further the roof and then jumping down onto balconies to get out. The last two were saved because a Hong Kong official who knew who was still in there, apparently they had been older and they had heart conditions or they were not in the best of health, and he knew that they were still in there hiding. So he actually walked to he was able to walk to get into 31 Königstrasse. He walked past security. He walked there. He walked right inside and he said, "No, this is not okay. My guys from Hong Kong are up there. I'm gonna go get them out." And so him and some of the terrorists, Fedayeen, walked up to the 3rd floor, knocked on the door, got him, walked out with him. So
Oh my God.
So it's interesting. So they really these terrorists, their goal, they were going after Israeli athletes. I mean, they could have captured so many more, but it was like, these are not our enemies, so we're gonna let them go out. So they didn't
let them go.
They didn't really pose any threat to anyone outside of these Israeli athletes at this.
No, so that's literally all they were going for.
Yeah. Yes.
It's crazy.
So we're at 5:10 a.m. and so in part 2, I think we still have something like 16 more hours to go. So 16 or 17 more hours to go. So there's a lot more to learn.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. And I would say that since this is going to be a little bit longer than normal, and since it's a 2-part, probably no dumb criminal after this episode.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So next time we will finish up our case.
It's crazy. I can't believe how much there is that's gone into this. It's mad.
Yeah.
It's sad too. It's like now, I suppose in hindsight, looking back at it, it's so obvious what was going on.
Yeah.
But I suppose at the time, nobody really expected, well, not that they didn't expect it at all, because obviously they did expect something was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Or they thought at least, there could be a chance. But I don't know. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just one person changing their chain of events could have stopped this whole thing from happening, which is quite scary.
It is very, very scary.
The guy, if he had just not got embarrassed about the underwear, it could have been completely different.
Or it could have been if Schreiber took the threat analysis, serious.
More seriously.
It could have. Or if these tips that are coming in about potential attacks were taken serious.
Yeah, that's right.
There's so many things.
It's worrying, isn't it? There is so many things.
I mean, yeah, even with the postal workers who saw these guys like running through the village, if they're like, okay, well, let's go at least check it out. I don't know if
let's go and look at.
I don't know if that point they would have been able to stop it, but I mean,
but still, they would have been a little bit more Maybe
But
they would have alerted somebody that would have.
The fact of the matter, though, is that the German officials were not prepared for anything like this to occur.
No.
So
that's right.
even if, let's say that the postal worker's like, hey, there's some suspicious guys running through the village, and they're like, okay, let's go check it out. They had no way to respond right away. So to an event like this.
Yeah.
So there was nothing that really would have stopped them or any other group of people from doing this.
It's mad.
Yeah. So
Yeah, it is mad.
it is very, very mad. And it's only going to get worse.
Thank you. I look forward to the next one. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, with that, I bid all of our listeners a fond adieu. And
we will be back next week with part 2.
With part 2. Absolutely right.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. So for now, it'll be nice.
And bye.